People sometimes ask me what to do when you fail. And I'm not talking here about moral failure. That we can talk about that another day. But I'm talking about the sort of failure where you try to do something and you don't do it well, or maybe you do it really, really badly. Maybe in a job, or maybe in a relationship, or maybe in some other way in your life. And some people would look at that and they would say, well, if you fail, you're a loser. And many of you, when you fail, you feel like a loser. Part of that has to do with this sort of culture that we have in American life right now of winning and displaying. And some of that's entirely reasonable. I mean, I'm talking to you right now on this video, and we don't string together every video that we started to do where it didn't work out, lighting wasn't right, or I messed up, or something. You don't see that for obvious reasons. But the problem is when we don't see the sorts of failures that other people have had and that they have ongoingly, it means that we sometimes think when a failure happens that it's catastrophic and it's unique to me. What I want to say to you is, though, failure, again, not talking about moral failure, but just talking about failure in terms of the things that you're called to do, that's actually how you get good. In my world, in terms of people who are called to ministry, sometimes I'll have people who will say, what do you do if you're a bad preacher or a bad teacher? Well, almost everybody starts out as a bad preacher and a bad teacher. And the way that people get better is they recognize that, they aspire to something better, they see where they messed up, they learn from their mistakes. That really applies to everything, to almost every sort of calling that you might have. It even applies to the way people are raised. Sometimes you will have, if you're an older child, maybe your parents will have been too hypervigilant with you, too tough, too maybe helicoptering, and maybe if you're one of the youngest kids, maybe your parents have been a little more haphazard. In one case, they're too tensed up. And in another case, maybe they're too complacent. I say, well, that can happen really in either way. The important thing, though, as you do what it is that God's called you to do, is to learn from your mistakes. Figure out when you made a mistake, figure out why you made a mistake, figure out what was the thought process or the intuitional process behind that, and also watch other people's mistakes. Learn from them, not in terms of judging them, but learning how this happened. One of the things that was really helpful to me in my life is serving in positions in various places, secular and ministry, throughout my life, where I've seen people do things that I wouldn't do and tried to figure out why are they doing that. And what I figured out is, in many cases, as time went by, I looked back and said, I see why he did that. I see why she did that. I just didn't have the insight to know it. In other cases, I've seen things that seem to be reasonable, but I've seen where they went. And sometimes I will see in my own life, wait a minute, I'm starting to do something very similar to that. I need to think this through. That's consistent with the book of Proverbs that talks about observation, about looking at what are the typical results of certain actions. So failure can actually be a good teacher in that. Somebody who has been important in helping me think through issues of failure is a secular leadership guide by the name of Seth Godin. He's written a lot of books. I've read almost everything that he's ever written. And one of the things he talks about is failure being when we don't quit the things that we shouldn't be doing, and when we quit the things that we should be doing. So there are all sorts of things that you shouldn't do because you're not gifted and equipped to do those things. I have friends who are really, really skilled and gifted at church planting. I wouldn't be. And I have some things that I do that they wouldn't be gifted to do. And the same applies to you. But Godin makes the point that also it's not just that they are quitting things that they should be doing, or not quitting things that they shouldn't be doing, but they're quitting too soon on things that they actually could do and they actually could get better at. And Godin talks about it in this little book called The Dip that I really recommend to you. because he asks a series of questions that I think are really good. They help me to think through issues when I have done things that I wish I hadn't done, or done things in a way I wish I had done better. And the first is, are you panicking? So if you look back and you just look at history, look at the people you admire, look at your heroes, what you're typically going to find are people who encounter a great deal of resistance in terms of what it is that they're doing, and they don't leave. They continue pressing through to the end. So sometimes you will have somebody who's starting a ministry, say, and there's some resistance that's coming to that, and then they just leave and go somewhere else and start the cycle all over again. So are you panicking here? Ask that question. Number two, who are you trying to influence? As Godin points out, nobody's going to serve everybody. And he gives the example of Amazon reviews. If you go and pull up almost anything on Amazon, you will see some one-star reviews for Moby Dick. You will see a group of people who don't like virtually anything. And so often you're going to have this temptation to want to just fit into what's normal. And I think this is really deadly for people who are called to do things for Christ, because as Godin puts it, if you do what's normal, you will always disappoint the weird. And as the world gets weirder, that's a dumb strategy. I would just add to that, it always was a dumb strategy, because the way that God works is always something that starts out very small and then works forward from there. And then another question that he suggests asking is, what sort of measurable progress am I making? Now that's easier to see if you're at a business and you can sort of look at profit, or you have a lawn mowing service and you can see how many more people you're serving than you were before. It's a little harder when you're doing things that are less tangible than that. But I would say listen to people. Have people in your life that you can take counsel from. And what I would say to that is only listen to people that you would listen to anyway about someone or something else. So sometimes I will have conflicting sorts of counsel. And one of the ways that I resolve that is by saying, is this someone that I would go to for advice about somebody else or some completely different situation? If not, I take that into account. The main thing is that you're going to fail. And the important thing is, are you going to get up, discern what happened, discern where you should go, and move forward? Discouragement is no sign that you should quit. Discouragement sometimes is a sign that you ought to keep pressing forward, because you have to lose often in the short term to win in the long term. Failure is a part of that. Failure often really isn't failure at all. 1 Corinthians tells us about the power of God and the wisdom of God being very different from the power of the world and the wisdom of the world. The same thing applies as you're developing your skills and your callings moving forward. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what we talked about today? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know what you'd like for us to talk about in the future on this channel. And don't forget to like or share this video if you found it helpful, and make sure that you subscribe and hit notifications so that you can get all of our new videos when they release.